The United Nations organization was founded after World War II in hopes of future world peace and to replace the former League of Nations. With 6 official languages, 192 member states, and a total of 64 peacekeeping operations, the UN is one of the largest and most influential organizations in the world. Besides promoting international peace, the UN is responsible for monitoring international law, economic development, human rights, international security, and social progress. Many past missions have been successful, but in recent years it has become clear that some reforms have to be made in order to make future missions more reliable. The addition of a standing army to the peacekeeping organization would increase the success rate and effectiveness of future missions. This army would be completely under the command and control of the UN. With more dedicated soldiers, proper training facilities, and sufficient resources, a standing army would be of much more help in modern-day missions. One of the UN's biggest mistakes was failing to prevent the genocide in Rwanda. There had always been conflicts between the Hutu and Tutsi groups in the country. The Hutus gained control over the government when Rwanda was granted independence in 1962. The minority Tutsi population was discriminated against, and as a result, many Tutsis fled the country. In 1978, Habyarimana was elected president of Rwanda. As a result, many Tutsis fled the country, and refugees in Uganda formed the RPF in hopes of overthrowing the president so they could safely return to their homeland. UN peacekeepers were sent into Rwanda to monitor the situation, and in August 1993, a ceasefire agreement was signed between Habyarimana and the RPF. Despite the UN's efforts, tensions continued between the two groups, and in April of 1994, the president's plane was shot down. Convinced that the RPF had caused his death, Hutu rebel groups began to massacre thousands of Tutsis, resulting in a brutal genocide. In just 100 days, 800,000 people were killed in Rwanda. In order to prevent tragedy from repeating itself, the UN realized that it needed to learn from the mistakes it had made in the past, reevaluate their old methods, and use experiences such as Rwanda to help peacekeeping missions become more reliable tools for the future. While there are many things that peacekeeping has accomplished, there is still much room for improvement. The increasing number of peacekeeping missions in recent years has brought on many new challenges that require the UN to change the way they organize and carry out missions. These challenges include the capacity of forces, political will, rules of engagement, rule of law, and financial restraints. In the past 10 years, the UN's annual budget has tripled, partially due to the increased demand for resources. Another new challenge in peacekeeping is quickly responding to a crisis. Developed nations have been reluctant to assist, and since resources are limited and much of the organization is volunteer-based, it is difficult to quickly assemble and organize a mission. A standing army would help solve this problem. Today's missions are also much more complex than they were in the past when peacekeepers were only used to monitor ceasefire agreements between conflicting states. Now political, humanitarian, and military assistance is being applied in missions, and the term peace maintenance has been coined to describe the joint effort of these 3 elements. An example of how new peace maintenance techniques have been used successfully in modern missions is Sierra Leone. The mission was established in 1999 to monitor the peace accord that ended the Civil War. Refugees returned to the country and were reintegrated into society. The authority of the government was restored and the power of officials was reconstructed. This success has made officials confident that the new methods will have a positive effect on future missions. However, peace maintenance requires the military to play a bigger role in the organization, which has led some people to question whether the missions are actually creating peace or simply causing more violence and deaths. One of the major debates in the UN is the extent to which military force should be used in peacekeeping missions and at what point it is necessary to deploy troops. The traditional do-no-harm principle seems like it should be the basis of a peace organization, but past experiences such as Rwanda have shown us that without a military, peace missions can be quite useless. The UN's only current source of military forces is the Blue Helmets. These are soldiers, civilian personnel, and police officers voluntarily provided by member states to serve under a UN commander. They are most commonly used to demobilize and disarm hostile groups and create buffer zones after ceasefire agreements are put in place. One disadvantage to the UN's current military system is that they have to rely on the cooperation of member states to supply troops when they are needed. The soldiers deployed often lack proper equipment and sufficient training because of the poor financial state of these nations. Accordingly, they are often unable to effectively carry out missions. Another disadvantage of the Blue Helmet system is the long process of deploying troops. There is often a lack of communication between peacekeepers and the officials of the member state that they are working with. By the time that the UN has organized a military force to be deployed, it is often too late and there isn't much an army can do to counteract the situation. If the UN had their own standing army, they would be able to select their own personnel, train and educate them at qualified facilities, and arm them with the equipment required to carry out missions successfully. The personnel would not only be trained for general combat, but specifically for peacekeeping missions, which would make them much more effective than the troops provided by member states. The Army would be more motivated and dedicated than the Blue Helmets because they are willingly working with the UN, not being assigned the job by their country. Troops would also always be on hand, and as a result, it would take much less time to deploy troops, greatly reducing the number of missions that fail due to lack of resources. It would also be cost-effective for the UN to have a standing army. While the initial addition of a standing army would be an investment, the benefits of having their own troops would save them money in the future. With their own army, they wouldn't have to supply member states with resources when troops are needed, which is an event that is becoming increasingly common. With the number of peacekeeping missions on the rise and the increasing complexity of these missions and the factors involved, it has become clear that the addition of a standing army to the UN is necessary for future missions to be successful. The rapid deployment of troops and effectiveness of a well-trained and properly equipped army would make a huge difference in peacekeeping missions.